Dr. Shiller, welcome to Network Capital. It's an honor to have a masterclass by a Nobel Laureate. We're a peer-to-peer skill-sharing community, and we're very interested to learn more about your career. Let's start from the beginning. What got you interested in the subject of your work?
Sure. Okay, that's hard to remember. I first got interested in economics, I think, when my older brother came home from college with the Samuelson economics textbook. But I have a tendency to pick up things to read them, and I read Samuelson's textbook, and so they got me going.
And in school and college, do you remember how life was studying economics? Like, did you really relish the subject, or was it hard at times?
But of course, it was hard at times. Did I relish it? I didn't major in anything. I could be a professor of you name it. I wanted to be a scholar at that age, but I didn't necessarily focus on economics. I thought maybe it was people I met then who impressed me. Philosophy, economics has been called worldly philosophy. That was Worldly Philosophers was the title of the book by Heilbronner. So it seemed, Adam Smith was a professor of moral philosophy. Maybe that appealed to me.
So at what age are we talking about right now? What age did you scholar?
I just moved up from age 14 when I read Samuelson's textbook to age 19 when I began to really focus on the idea of an economic career.
Wonderful. And what at that time, was there a question or set of questions that you wanted to solve through the economic lens? Because you mentioned that you wanted to be a scholar and not necessarily be a scholar in economics. So what questions were you thinking about?
Well, economics impressed me because it solves real problems. It has a technology for solving problems. I would add finance to it. That's a subset of economics. Samuelson said, I think in his textbook, I'm trying to remember, I spent a long time, but it seems that he said that I believe in, this is a very loose memory of him, I believe in economics and promoting the wealth of people because it matters to real people. Things like healthcare, education, transform our lives. And there are many different single problems, but the overall problem is developing the economy and improving the standard of living and allowing people to make choices that matter about things that matter to them.
How was undergraduate education for you? Did you find some mentors in college?
I did find mentors in college. What comes first to my mind was Kenneth Boulding. I went to the University of Michigan, which was a major state university in the United States. Kenneth Boulding was he presented a view of economics that was highly morally grounded. In fact, just after I graduated, he gave the presidential address before the American Economic Association. It noted economics as a moral science. That was in Chicago, if I remember. I may be wrong. It's been a long time. That was 1969. But I went to it to hear his speech. My former teacher, and what he said is that economics particularly allows us to invent the world that we live in. And it should be done with a moral purpose. That particularly impressed me. I had other faculty members who impressed me a lot. One of them was a history professor, Shaw Linderbar, who maybe I haven't heard much about him lately, but he gave a course that talked about the Great Depression and why it happened. That it made me think that there are preventable economic problems, but it requires study to know how to do that.
That's really interesting. Some people say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does follow patterns. Do you see that today in economics and finance?
Who said that? Do you know?
I think Mark Twain.
That's what I was going to guess. But I thought Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
That's Mark Twain.
So does economics and finance, you think it also is repeating itself in some way, or is it rhyming?
Well, one of the themes of my most recent books, which will be coming out in September of 2019, is narrative economics. And that many of the successful economic ideas are they spread through the public when they're recapsulated as narratives. And these narratives come in and are repeated from time to time. They fade away and they come back. They're recurrent or perennial narratives. And so I think that economic stories have a lot of potential for contagion, and they affect our behavior and our sense of purpose in what we do.
Tell us more about your Nobel Prize. Why did you get it? What was the subject that you were grappling with?
I won the Nobel Prize jointly with two other economists, Lars Peter Henson and Eugene Fama. The title of our subject was Models of Asset Pricing. So that's one thing that I do, a major component of my work. The Nobel Prize, you have to remember, is a prize for an achievement. It's not a overall life career prize. So all three of us have thought about speculative price and come to somewhat different conclusions, but I think we share the intellectual adventure. Particularly, my input of that was mathematical models of security pricing that they particularly emphasized at the awards ceremony. But there were also other aspects of my research that, notably behavioral economics and behavioral finance, that were also mentioned.
Could you tell more about the behavioral aspects of your research?
Yeah, well, one thing, I was talking about my own experience as an undergraduate in economics. I was an admirer of many of my professors, but I also had an incipient in the sort of sense of critique. Well, I should mention another professor at the University of Michigan who wrote a book called Economic Psychology that influenced me then. So it goes all the way back to my undergraduate education that I believe that we need to look more broadly at economics than just the hardcore mathematical models. George Patona was my professor who talked about psychology. This led to a revolution in economics that began with Patona, I suppose, but most history of thought, no, it doesn't begin with him either. It's always been there. There's always been economists talking about psychology. I guess I was reacting against a movement afoot in economics that was particularly strong in the second half of the 20th century to pursue abstract mathematical economics. Actually, I had nothing against that, but I didn't want to have that dominate my attention. These models tended to be models of people's rational behavior. It describes people as having a utility function, which describes their objectives, and they never change their mind. They are out there maximizing expected utility. I thought that was a neat theory, but I wasn't going to be entirely constrained by it. I thought that the profession overemphasized its value. So I found comfort in people like Patona, who taught me about psychology. And later on, I worked with Dick Thaler. He and I put together for 25 years a sequence of seminars at the National Bureau of Economic Research in the United States that emphasized on describing recent research in psychology and economics.
Wonderful. You mentioned that the three of you came to slightly different conclusions, but you enjoyed the intellectual adventure. Tell us more about it. How is it working with two equally gifted people who came to different conclusions, but yet enjoyed the adventure?
Well, there were interesting moments at the Nobel ceremony. One of them was when they had the three of us on stage together. It seemed like a great moment for us to congratulate each other and not criticize each other. So I was trying to think of how I would praise Eugene Fama, who is the most. Lars Peter Hansen is kind of between the two of us, so neither of us quarreled with him. But between the two extremes, me and Fama, but it was kind of a divide. So I had the idea of congratulating Fama on the success of his company called Dimensional Fund Advisors. It's an investment management firm that has outperformed the market, actually. So I congratulated him on outperforming the market. He didn't like that, and I stopped doing it. Later in Nobel Week, I felt I was irritating him. But it was genuine praise. What he discovered was factor portfolios that had different average returns than that market as a whole. So you could invest in those, and the film outperformed the market. However, I have to say that he didn't like that story, that narrative about what he'd achieved. What he would like to say, as Dimensional Fund Advisors said, what he discovered were risk factors that gave higher return to investors who could accept that risk. So he started everything as perfectly rational. Whereas I viewed the very discoveries that he made as discoveries about human imperfections or human psychology. So we just gave a different story. I think during all of Nobel Weeks, we never really uncovered any important difference that could be resolved by experimental or by research methods. We basically agree on the facts.
So how does it actually work? Most of us have not won a Nobel Prize, but three people who came to different conclusions on one subject are awarded a Nobel Prize together. Is that roughly how it works?
That has happened before in the Nobel experience. It seems that it may be that the Nobel is hedging its risks and doesn't want to, I don't know, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
But they don't know how the research agenda will ultimately come out. But they don't want to wait until it's all finally resolved. Most important research is controversial at first. And they didn't want to miss, I suppose, the opportunity to give a prize for a research that one way or the other will eventually be dominant. And I have to also say that not all of my research would be, in any sense, contrary to Fama's. I did research also that this model of people as having rational decision processes.
That's super interesting. Tell us how you found out about your Nobel Prize and how did you feel? What were you doing?
Well, okay. For some years, my wife set the alarm, turned on the phone in our bedroom on the night that the Nobel Prize was supposed to be announced the following morning. They do it through a phone call. And
on your cell phone?
On our home phone. Well, that's what they did, yeah. Well, But the night before, I was browsing the web. This is 2013. And I was reading The Guardian, and it had my picture, The Guardian newspaper in the UK. And it said, potential Nobel Prize winners. So how did they know? They didn't say that I would win it the next morning. They said a favorite to win it. So I wonder if some of that was a leak. You know, that they didn't know whether it was right, but they had a hunch. So I went to bed that night thinking I might win the Nobel Prize tomorrow morning. So then I was actually leaving on a trip for Phoenix, Arizona for a mathematical finance conference. And so I got up early to prepare for my trip. I was getting out of the shower and the phone rang. And I thought for a moment,
tell me something, like these people are trying to use algorithms to hack finance, algorithms to hack dating, algorithms for hacking anything and everything. What's your view on this? Like, is that a hype or is that a bubble or somewhere in between?
Well, I don't think it's a hype. There may be bubble aspects to it. Maybe people are expecting it to change our lives sooner than it will. But algorithms, I think, make sense. It expands you can react faster with an algorithm. You have to have some theory or some philosophy that underlies your trading. And it's helpful to try to quantify and make it operational. On the other hand, there's also something to be said for judgmental, active investing, because often history changes in ways that are not measurable in statistical procedures. I'm thinking, people use the confidence index, either the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index or the Conference Board. Well, now they're all over the world. OECD has them. They tend to be, the indexes tend to be based on a few questions that are asked the same way over time, and they tabulate the responses to the questions. But I can see a historical basis for those questions. Namely, the confidence indexes began after the Great Depression during the Great Depression, when George Gallup did some of the first questionnaire polls about confidence. Some of the early questions that were used by the University of Michigan and are still used in confidence indexes relate to whether we're going through another depression or whether another depression is imminent. So these questions were invented in respect to some story that had emerged. The story that the Great Depression was caused by fear, and President Roosevelt's famous quote, "The only thing to fear is fear itself." So we go on with those asking those questions, but the next depression might have a different cause. In the case of the Great Recession, 2007 to 2009, a lot of talk at that time was not about a spontaneous loss of confidence, but it was about a excess in lending to support home prices and eventual collapse of a housing bubble. No one would have asked people whether they thought it was a housing bubble before the housing bubble, because that phrase wasn't used before that, or hardly ever. It might have been extreme rarity that someone put those two words together. So, the history is always changing in qualitative ways. And one may obtain some trading advantage by thinking about was changing narratives.
That's so interesting. On a community, we have a lot of people who are interested in psychology, finance, trading. But I want to ask, if you were to give advice to somebody of becoming a better trader, considering all aspects, what advice would that be? And the second part of that question is that, as somebody who doesn't understand trading and finance, what's your advice to the ordinary citizen to deal with the complexity that the financial world seems to offer?
Well, I don't know what advice I would give generally. There are so many different smart people in the field. So maybe the advice for the ordinary investor is don't bother and just hold a diversified portfolio. I was recently impressed with thinking about John Bogle, who is founded the Vanguard funds that now will invest on behalf of individuals in 170 countries, and they have more than 20 million subscribers or investors. So thinking that Vanguard believed in index, holding out of just the market index. And so we associate his name with sensible, broad investing. But I think I actually admire the man. As he just died, and maybe we tend to think positively about people at that point in their life history. But I think he also overstated the case for avoiding, for giving up on trading the market. I think one has to assess one's own talent in that area, and also one's commitment to thinking a lot about this. It is a commitment. And some people who are aspiring poets might be wisely advised, just invest in a broad market portfolio. On the other hand, we can't advise that to everyone, because then market prices would have no glory. Something has to be deciding the pricings of these things. Ultimately, it's investors, some investors who are active, who try to judge the investment potential. So you can't say it's a little bit, it may seem patronizing, but you think if you're not above average in your investing ability, don't even try. Okay, I hate to have to say it like that. It's not just a matter of your intelligence, you have to remember. It's a matter of your interest in the idea. And if you're not interested, don't feel obligated to go in.
Thank you very much for sharing. I want to discuss a bit about your learning habits and your productivity techniques. What is, do you have a slotted time for reading or learning new things? Or I want to get a glimpse of how your day looks like on average.
Well, this isn't the result of training, and maybe just my personality. I think that I have a relatively, my attention jumps. I mentioned how I picked up my brother's textbook in economics and read it. So I tend to be distractible and note, but also I like to read different things, and it's my personality. I think young people have to decide on how their personality fits the job that they take. I remember I had a summer job when I was in college as a bank teller, and it actually was a credit union. And there was a line would form out my window, and I would have these people coming one after another. Now, in some sense, I found that nice. I mean, some people were polite and made jokes. But then I thought, doing this for the rest of my life, no way am I going to want to do this. So I thought they're looking at myself. I didn't get any personality tests or the like. But I thought one thing that differentiates me from others is that I like big projects where I'm in control. Like I made model ships. And I worked long, hard on them. In fact, I got myself thinking, why am I doing this? I know it's nobody cares about these model ships. Then I dropped that. So then I wanted to combine my natural inclination for big projects that are under my complete direction. And I think that's why I chose to become a college professor. No university will tell a professor, drop that research topic and move to this research topic. They might tell you what course they need taught, but they won't tell you what research to do. When you can develop research ideas over years, which makes it into a huge project. The different papers one publishes in finance or economics are just little aspects of a bigger lifetime project. And that appealed to me. And it has a lonely side, unless I think I write fewer co-authored papers. I do that though too. So if you're writing singly authored papers or books, I've written a lot of books. It's about over 10 books. I like to do that, but it puts me alone.
The new book is by you, or is it
By me alone? Yeah. I wrote 2 books recently in succession with George Akerlof. And that was a great experience working with it. You really learn another mind and how they think.
What was it that made it great, the partnership or the experience?
Well, we kept coming up with new ideas together. And I would talk to him and he would talk to me, and we'd come back with ideas. Sometimes we argued. That happens. But we ended up on good terms, and we may write another book someday.
Wonderful. So this way of work habits similar? Work ethic, work habits, working styles?
Are they what?
Were they similar? Your and your co-authors?
I think probably so. George has also written a number of books and important articles. He was, like I, he was interested in problems with modern economic theory. Neither of us was slave to the existing thinking. And he wrote some books and articles that brought in psychology. So, for example, he wrote a book with a woman, Rachel Tranton, called Identity Economics. That really is a precursor to my narrative economics. What he's saying is that the most important thing that people value, if they're not starving, and they're not dying of a disease, after that, the most important idea that influences their thinking is, who am I? What am I doing? What's the meaning of my life? This is an old idea that meaning of life matters. But we were in one of our recent books, emphasizing the importance of narrative. Everyone has a life story. Even people who you may have a habit of ignoring. The elderly cleaning lady who comes out and empties your wastebaskets. If you got her engaged in conversation, you would find that she thinks of herself as some kind of hero, maybe a family hero or a grandmother. I can't name her. I can't tell you what her narrative is, but she has a narrative about the importance of her life, and it matters. Ultimately, many of economic actions that people take are determined as a source of identity establishment.
Fascinating. Universities are going through a change moment. What trends do you see universities taking? Do you think that universities of the future will look like the universities of the past?
Already there are changes afoot in the universities. In fact, I have, right now we're doing a video, by the way, and it's related to what I do at my university, but it's in a cyberspace venue. And I have an online course on Coursera, or Yale Coursera, on financial markets. I reach so many more people all over the world. It makes me wonder, why do I still teach ordinary-sized classes when I can reach many more people online? But I think that there will be a role for teachers always, because of our humanity. It is that people. It's like the identity issue. You want someone who knows who you are and understands what matters to you and why you are important. I think that actually universities could improve their functioning a lot if they could somehow improve the long-term relation between faculty and students. So we're individually mentors for students, and the mentorship shouldn't end with graduation. Unfortunately, it does. Students come back that took my class 10 years ago, and I might not even remember them. I think that somehow this is my ill-formed thoughts about where universities will go, or other schools that will somehow involve software that, like a social media, that keeps our relations, that amplifies our relations with our students, and makes us more connected with them. I actually, Paul Samuelson, I mentioned, was a textbook writer that got me into economics. Then I had him as a teacher in grad school at MIT. And then after MIT, he was unusual. He called me up occasionally and discussed things like, where did he get that? Who does that? In fact, 2 months before he died, when he was 94 years old, he called me up and he wanted to talk about moral issues facing economics. I think that he did that spontaneously. That was that spontaneous part of his nature that might have made him, some people say, the most eminent economist of his century. At least that's one line of talk. He had the most influential textbook. So I don't think that, because we're human, I think teaching will be a profession that expands in the future. We may likely have smaller classes, and that's another thing that will help keep ongoing relations. And there'll be more time spent after class with students.
It's fascinating. Do you have any advice for people who are just entering the workforce or graduating out of college or thinking about college?
Who have graduated?
For young people, where most of our users are in the age group of 18 to 30 or in the process of making a career choice.
Some of my advice may sound, they've heard it before, but
maybe not from a Nobel Laureate.
I think that some young people are too cynical about life and think that, about career, and think that they have to imitate others more and do the fashionable things. So that might be short-term necessary. There might be a phase in your life right after graduation when you have to get a job and do something, when you have to be short-run in your orientation. But later on, you have to remember that great careers are built on being something different. You can't be doing the same thing as everybody else in order to expect a great career. And there's a lot of thought, should be a lot of fodder in your imagination as to what could be done differently, and you have to cultivate that. And you have to expect criticism that might last for years for doing something that seems a little different, or risk-taking. This is, as an example, I'm relatively unusual among professors in setting up companies on the side as a professor. So in 1991, I teamed up with a former student and a professor of economics at Wellesley College. We formed a company, Case Shiller Weiss, to produce home price indices. And we put them online. We were a website where you could get an evaluation of your home using our indexes. I did that because I thought it was on a research topic. We had an opportunity. We were dominated later by Zillow and other websites. But we did have, in the 1990s, a website that sold directly to the public values of homes, so they could find out what their home prices were. But I also thought that indexes, that's like a boring topic, home price indexing. Most economists then would not have published papers on how to compute home price indexing. Why not? I don't know. They tend to think they want to get into the top 5 journals, the prestige journals, And the prestige journals just don't seem to be interested in price indexing. If you send that off to a top journal, they will likely reject it and say not of sufficient interest to our readership. But then that forces you, if you take it too seriously about getting published in the top 5 journals, you're going to end up with fake. You're going to end up not following your ideas. You're going to end up imitating other people's work. And that's not what you want to do. So I think I was less committed to trying to get published. And I wanted to do things that I thought were important. Turns out that our repeat sale index methodology has been now spread over much of the world, or at least as an inspiration for about this. Now home price indices are everywhere. Still maybe not in the journals. There'll be some in the journals. But I really think that the repeating like basic advice, you have to do something different. You have to follow your own instincts in order to see how you can come up with something that eventually will be highly valued.
This is probably the best piece of advice one can get on careers, like learn by doing. You know, you're one of the rare set of people who succeeded both as an academic and as somebody who set up companies. But I want to ask you, what has been the hardest part of being you? Or what has been the most challenging experience of your life, and how did you overcome that?
I don't know how to answer that. I'm just free thinking. When I was in high school, I joined the debate team. No kidding. And I don't think I was very good at it. I didn't excel. But I did that to broaden my horizon. But I thought I would never be a public speaker. I was shy and nervous about it. I thought that the other members of my high school debate team were way ahead of me. I'm not naturally a confident person. Somehow I came out though that public speaking has been an important part of my life. And I guess it was discovering that I don't have to be like those other students that I thought were winning debaters back then. I was just developing my own thinking. Ultimately, when people look for public speakers, they want people who will say something unusual or different. And doesn't matter so much what kind of clothes I wear or what kind of instructions I got from my debate coach.
That's very interesting. Often school memories are the ones that stick. Just we're coming to the close of the interview. I just want to take a moment to sincerely thank you for your time. I mean, this has been a riveting conversation, and if we had the time, we could have just gone on for much longer. But ending with this one. You've researched, you've thought, you've talked, you've done business. I would understand that who's been like the one person or a set of close people who've helped you expand your thinking, like your wife?
Now, I didn't expect that question, and I should have a good answer for a closing question. Maybe this won't directly answer your question, but I have to express appreciation to the universities that hired me. It was before Yale, it was Minnesota and Pennsylvania, for allowing me. There is a certain enlightenment at universities that is about the importance of broad thinking and how obtaining information and experiences that are outside of a conventional course. So all of these universities allow you to form a business. They have a limit on how much time you can put outside of the academics. But I like that encouragement. So it was I have to be thankful to have had that sort of life that involved me in teaching, but also in the real world. By the way, it's not just business. I also have been writing newspaper columns. I write columns every 6 weeks for the New York Times, and every other month for Project Syndicate. That has been a broadening experience for me too. There's another culture, the journalism culture, maybe a separate department at the university, but they shouldn't be separate. We can learn from the journalism department. We can learn from people who operate in other spaces.
Thank you so much. I have so much gratitude to express. I really appreciate it. This interview will go out to thousands of people around the world, and they'll be able to hopefully make more informed career choices. Thanks so much for the inspiration.